Alrighty, I have 5 o'clock. I am Jessica Gilbert, Director of Community Affairs for Kids Central. Thank you all for joining us for our Lake County Education Forum. I have with me our education liaison, Deborah Winters, and she's actually going to be taking you through Lake County's plans and answering some questions that you guys may have. We do ask that you put the questions into the chat box or wait until the end for those questions. It's easier if we can go through them kind of as you're thinking about them if you just type them into the box. We are recording this so we can share it with other foster parents as well, just so you're aware. And I'm going to turn it over to Miss Debbie Winters to get started for us. And if you have any questions, again, write in the chat box, and we hope to answer some of those questions for you today. So, Miss Debbie, take it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you everyone for joining us. We know that this was rather short notice for something to be put together, but we also felt that it was important to help support our caregivers and stakeholders as we enter into what is the unknown for the new school year. And when we were talking about this, our planning group, things last Wednesday looked like something, and then they've changed by Friday. And literally, as of yesterday, there was a small change made to Lake County. So I'm glad we caught that and are having this now. Because originally, and for those of you that may have had information, they were looking at a date of yesterday, actually, the 13th, for parents to choose their option, and that has been extended to the 20th. So that's one thing I do want to start with. So moving forward, a little signal to, yep. Okay, so before we talk about moving forward, I just want to talk a little bit kind of about where we've been, because I'm sure, and I've said with the other groups, we titled this Experience, but in many ways, distance learning was an experiment. It wasn't, going into distance learning, remember that when we all thought, oh gosh, the kids are going to be home for a couple of weeks, we can manage this, and maybe elementary school had some packets to do, and then your 2 weeks turned into a month, and then before you knew it, 25% of the entire school year was done through distance learning. So not only were parents and students adapting and changing, so were the school districts. Again, the kind of tools that they might have used, the electronic platforms, might have been modified throughout that process. So when we look at the options moving forward, I want to be really clear that what school districts are talking about, whether it's any form of continued online learning or virtual school, which are two different things, that is not going to look like what we experienced in the spring with distance learning. That might be considered a positive or a negative. We knew that this was not a parental choice. It wasn't like you said, hey, I want to home educate my kids and I want to, be assisting them with all of these educational tasks. The majority of students did engage in distance learning, some maybe not as much as they could have or should have. And there were instances in districts where students were unable to participate at all, whether that was by choice or not. Some families did not have either the electronic device, or if they did not have, stable internet. It wasn't the kind of thing that you can do easily on your cell phones. So it was a challenge for all. And we know that some students really thrived in the distance learning. Again, the rigor might not quite have been there like it would be in the options as we look into the new school year, but they thrived by not having those distractions, by being able to focus, by being able to go back and review material or re-look at something where they might not be able to do that due to the pace that has to be kept up in the classroom. And others struggled. It was, they needed that face-to-face instruction. They are not a student who could be successful in a remote learning environment. So the experiences were varied. And like I said, districts learned an awful lot from the experience. They learned what worked well. They listened to the survey results that went out to parents. I'm sure they got a lot of feedback that weren't part of the survey as well. And they have in turn modified their remote learning plans based on what we learned from this experience. So as we move forward into the next school year, Lake County options, there are essentially three that parents and caregivers have a choice. You can return to school full-time, returning to your brick and mortar school, or a modified, what they're calling a modified day program. And I'll talk about each of these options in a second. There is also the Lake virtual school option. That is a school option that has always been in place for choice within any school district. Any of the options, school is starting at least right now. You know, again, things could change next week, but as of right now, starting on August 10th, as I said, the options for Lake County, the way that looks there, it looks like you have to choose the Lake virtual. You have to choose any of the options, the July 20th for making your choice for any one of those three options. One of the things that Lake has really gone above and beyond out of our 5 districts that we work with is they are going to be ensuring that every student, whether they are in school full-time or on the modified day, have a Chromebook. And that's their what they call one-on-one for the upcoming school district. So that will be a big bonus, so that even if they are in a brick and mortar school, they will have that Chromebook to work with. So looking at the brick and mortar situation, I think the biggest concern, we all know that school is, you know, hands-on, face-to-face instruction is the most ideal model for learning for a child, but obviously there are safety and health concerns in light of the current situation. So, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. So if you're seeing something on there and you're wondering, you know, what are they doing about this or that? I do encourage you, if you have not already gone to the Lake County Schools website, there's I think they call it a splash, a thing across the top there about the reopening plan. And then you can scroll through that. They've got frequently asked questions. They've got more details on each of these options. But this is generally just to highlight some of those to maybe help you guide that determination that needs to be made. So obviously, to the extent possible, schools are going to be practicing safe social distancing in the classroom, hallways, gyms, cafeteria. There'll be increased availability to sanitizers, wipes, and cleaning throughout the day. Any instruments or equipment that's used will be wiped down after each use. Group gatherings, so things like those spaces where, you know, there might be group activities, lunch, that will be limited as much as possible. During the first quarter of the school year, so that pretty much is going to run into about October 10th-ish is probably when the end of the first quarter is. So parents and visitors are going to have limited access to the school campus. So that means, you know, things like walking your students to the classroom if you're used to walking the little ones, or maybe having lunch with them, volunteering opportunities, mentoring, all that is going to be kept to a minimum so that they can control, you know, the number of folks on staff and the access to the campus that those visitors might have. Some of the other safety protocol measures are doing meetings virtually when feasible. I have to say, I mean, for me, who was scared to death, quite honestly, I'm in that generation of, I keep saying it, I like this electronic and technology stuff, but I still love my people and the faces and my papers. So I had no idea how some of this virtual stuff was going to work, and I'm loving it. I mean, as a person who travels across 5 counties, I'm all about having these meetings virtually if they can be done that way in the future. So things like IEP meetings, parent conferences, to the extent possible. So in the elementary schools, what they'll be doing is keeping them, they tend not to change classes like middle and high school do. They're going to be keeping those students together as much as possible. So, typically you might have had 3 classes go out and have PE together. So they're probably not going to be doing that sort of thing. They'll be keeping as much work done in the classroom and perhaps having the teachers do the rotation as needed, as opposed to just kids rotating in other classrooms and locations, minimizing that interaction in the cafeteria, media center, and even out on the playgrounds. At the secondary level, again, it's kind of hard there. If you've ever been in the hallways in middle school and high school, you just pin yourself up against the wall and wait until it all clears, because that's the gathering. There might only be 5 minutes, but it's amazing what kind of social interaction takes place. So they'll be trying to minimize groups gathering in the hallways. Again, trying to reduce the number of students in the cafeteria, media center, and the gym when it's possible. Students, I checked again to make sure that this was still the case, and as of today, the plan is that students are required to wear a face covering on the bus. It does not indicate that they are required on campus or in the classroom. And I'm sure they're recommended, but not required. On the buses, the areas, the high touch areas will be cleaned between the routes. Typically a bus comes by and picks up, maybe the high schoolers in the first, and then once that's dropped off, they go back and do another run for elementary and middle. So between those runs, they'll be doing some surface cleaning. And then at the end of the day, all the buses will be fully disinfected and cleaned at the end of each day. So again, those are just some of the protocols to help everyone have a little bit greater sense of comfort. And again, I encourage you to look at the website to get more detail on that. So the modified day, the way they are working the modified day is that students would continue to go to their brick and mortar school 5 days a week, but it would only be for the language arts and math instruction. The other courses, social studies, science, the various electives, would be done virtually. And in this model, students would either be assigned to a morning session to do those 2, language arts and math, or an afternoon session. The thing about this option is that if the midday transportation is a parental responsibility. So if you had a child that you chose this option and they went in, did a morning session, they could get a bus to school in the morning. So the school districts are providing buses to the school in the morning and buses back home at dismissal. So with the midday, if a child is going to be leaving, there is no transportation provided by the district, so the parents would have to pick up. Likewise, if you were doing the PM session, it would be a parental responsibility to get them to school, but a child would have the ability to take the bus home at dismissal. Students who are on the modified day can also participate in the school lunch program. If they're morning students, they'll be sent home with the bagged lunch. And in the PM, students can get the lunch when they arrive, provided that's still at a time that lunch is being served. There are a lot of, as we move a little further into the presentation, there's a lot of unanswered, quite honestly, about the modified day, because as the district is moving forward with this, they're doing their planning. The choices that parents are indicating with right now is going to help them determine how this is best going to be provided and what capacity the school has in terms of number of kids, how many kids are riding the bus, how many kids are going to be eating with us. There's a lot of unknown factors. The virtual school option, as is being presented, like I said, virtual schools are, that's not distance learning. That is not what we experienced in the spring. Every school district in Florida operates their own virtual school. Some have been doing it for decades, some maybe not quite as long. And they operate under different models. Some of them use the Florida Virtual School for their courses and curriculum and are essentially franchisees of Florida Virtual School. Some school districts use other virtual instruction providers, and there's a few districts in the state that even operate their own virtual school, their own curriculum, courses, everything. And as I said, it's a parental choice. It's been in place for many years. There are some students that do their entire kindergarten through 12th grade education through virtual school. It's not a very common thing with our kids in care, because when we look at any of these type of options, virtual schooling, home education, private school learning, all of those are all very contingent upon the factors that are in place at the moment being maintained. So, you know, it might be fine for a child to do a virtual school in your home, but should they have a change of placement, it might not be possible at the next place. Or a child who was on virtual before arriving to your home, and that's not a program or model that could be supported by you as caregivers, then that could cause a change. So we don't see the virtual school option very often with our kids because it requires being committed for at least a semester, if not the full year, because that doesn't translate to the regional schools. So if you don't complete work on virtual school, you don't get credit or grades for that unless, like I said, you have completed it. One of the things that is very different about the virtual school options as well is that those staff, those teachers, the administrators, guidance counselors that's what they know what they're getting into. This was the chosen mode of instruction. So they are trained and hired specifically to provide that type of learning outside of the classroom. The virtual school operated by districts, just as a little bonus for those that might be concerned about that. The teachers, the administrators, the guidance staff, everyone is local. They are employees of Lake County schools. So your teachers are Lake County school teachers. And this is not knocking the state virtual school, Florida virtual school, but your teacher for English might be in Tallahassee and your social studies teacher might be down in Miami. But having local teachers who know and understand the system of care and the education system there is an extra bonus, besides the fact that it helps keep our dollars, education dollars within the county that the children are being served in. So that's a little bit about virtual school in a general manner. So as for Lake, they've been operating their virtual school since 2012. Students would take all of their courses online with Lake Virtual. And although there is flexibility in virtual schools, there's still an expected daily pace. If you look on the Lake School's website and look into the virtual school, they hold up some pretty high standards, and the rigor and pace may not be something that all of our kids are able to manage and keep up with. So there's a requirement for keeping up with lessons, even though you can be flexible about when you're doing those lessons. There are live lessons that are incorporated. All students in virtual school, and of course the modified program that Lake is offering, participate in the district and state testing. So Lake County assessments, the state FSA, and of course exams, all of that, they still participate in that. What Lake Virtual will be doing this year is that seniors who choose the virtual school option, if that has not been, that's a new choice for them this year and they are a senior, they will be allowed to participate in the senior activities for their sort of home school, if you will. So if you've been at South Lake High School for 3 years and now as a senior, you're opting for virtual, you'll still be able to participate in those activities. And you would graduate and receive your diploma from your brick and mortar high school. So you're not getting a Lake County virtual school diploma. That child would be getting a South Lake High School diploma. It has always been permitted for students who are in virtual schools to participate in athletics at their zone school. And then as far as access, it's the district's plan. It may not be in place. They may not have sufficient numbers by the opening of school, but it's their plan to provide Chromebooks to students who participate in their virtual school as well. So I just did the little tag, if available. It really just when available, but just in case there's an issue. It had always been part of the district plan over a 5-year spread to get Chromebooks to every student. And they've, put that on a fast track to make it happen for this upcoming school year. All right. Okay. I know we said we'll leave questions to the end. I don't see any that have popped up on the chat. So, but I do encourage you, if you do have a question, to type it in there so that when we've kind of summarized things here, we can get to that. So some of the questions that have come up either by caregivers prior to this, one was, my son is scheduled to start VPK, so that's voluntary pre-kindergarten this fall. And the question is, can he do it through the modified or virtual school? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. The model for VPK in Florida, based on requirements, is a face-to-face instruction. The Lake County schools will be providing some options for half-day VPK programs that will run throughout the year. With VPK, there's a cap on the number of hours, 540 hours that are available to students for VPK. And by doing a half-day version of that, that can be stretched out over and across the full school year. So will modified day students be mixed in with other students who have chosen the traditional option? This is, this again is the kind of question that really can't be answered right now, because it's going to depend on how many students choose this option. The ideal would be that they are in their own class and not, popping in and out of the traditional classroom setting. But again, until they know, they meaning the district, knows how many children they have that have chosen these various options, they will then have to configure their staffing patterns accordingly. And regardless of whether it is in a modified or in the full traditional class, they have to be mindful of their requirements for class size requirements under the legislation. So that's a critical factor for them. I think many of us who have children in their care who are students with a disability, meaning that they have an IEP, individualized education plan, really struggled in many ways with the distance learning. And I don't think there's a district out there that would disagree that students who have exceptional education needs were very disproportionately impacted by the distance learning. So again, this is one of those things where districts have learned a lot. Initially, I mean, I was on a number of school meetings in that early April timeframe when schools were saying, well, we can't provide this therapy or because we can't do this evaluation because the school is closed. And that is really not an accurate statement. Both the state education commissioner as well as the U.S. Department of Education indicated that at no time during the distance learning were schools given a pass, if you will, to providing the needs that were identified on a child's IEP. Now, granted, some of those are a little harder to do. If you're doing physical therapy and they may not be able to do certain tasks that the physical therapist might do face-to-face, as they would do in a telehealth or remote manner. But I think schools learned a lot from the medical and therapeutic community on how this can be done, and will be adapting their services so that they can provide those in a remote manner when it's possible. I know Lake County hasn't said it specifically in their Q&A. Most of the other districts have indicated that they will do it remotely whenever possible, but it may be possible for some things to be face-to-face, especially as it comes to things like an evaluation. Um, some evaluations require direct observation, and that might not be as easy to do in a remote environment. Okay, so there's not a full answer on some of these things with the modified day, including what time do students have to report for the modified day, and is it 5 days? The answer to the 5 days, that's easy, yes. Students on modified day would be expected to come to school Monday through Friday. The times for the modified day have not been established. And it may be different from one school to the next based on how they are working their courses, the teacher's schedule, the class schedule, and so on. Kind of along the same lines, probably the same person wondering about whether siblings on a modified day would be on the same schedule. I mean, I can't even imagine, you've got your elementary kids in the morning and then your middle school kids in the afternoon. And the administrators at the school are going to work with parents and willing to do what they can to help siblings be on the same schedule in choosing that modified day. But the actual hours of operation for that have yet to be determined. All right, the question about if a student is participating or choosing either the Lake County virtual or the modified day, can they still participate in the things like band, choir, theater? And the answer is yes. Those are classes, although we think of those as extracurricular activities. Those are classes that can be taken. And if you're on virtual school, those could be a course that you take at your zone school, but that's going to mean, attending and being there in person for that. It is not going to be possible for the virtual school and possibly even the modified day to offer the same variety of electives. Again, it's going to depend on the choice, but if they're, I'm trying to think of an example. We'll just of an elective. I'll choose basket weaving, and if there's not enough kids for a basket weaving class, the school might not be able to offer that as an elective over the virtual environment. So again, still a lot of questions. Okay. Next up. So I kind of touched on this, and that's about the evaluations. And this question is about for both pre-K and school-age children. And the answer is yes, the school district will continue to identify, locate, and evaluate students that have a disability or suspected of having a disability, whether that is a 3-year-old through the ESE pre-K team or a student in high school. Those will still be conducted. And as I said before, some of those procedures will be able to be completed in a remote environment, but others may require direct observation or in-person contact. And of course, anything that is offered needs to be done in an in-person manner, would adhere to all safety guidelines for both that child and for the staff. And another question, and again, this is one that could be very fluid because school districts are taking their guidance from the local Department of Health, and what it would mean if they did have a student or a staff member test positive. What does that mean for that individual in terms of isolation or quarantine? What does that mean for school-wide? But in the event that there did need to be a temporary closing of a school because of a positive case, one of the great things, again, about the Lake model is that by having students have that Chromebook device already established, that would be a very easy way to transition any learning from home that might have to occur during the temporary closure. So before we get, I know there's a few questions that have popped up in the chat, and I'll answer those in one sec. So where do we go from here? Again, I would encourage you to go to the Lake Schools website to review the information about the options. There is a tab at the bottom to choose an option when you are ready to do so. The deadline for choosing the option is July 20th, but that does not lock you into a final decision. I can't tell you anything more than that. I don't know when they're going to say the final decision has to be made. I imagine it's going to be a pretty quick turnaround, considering school starts on August 10th. But by making that selection online, it doesn't lock you into that being your absolute final decision. And as I said, the options are going to help give the district a better idea of how to establish instruction for the upcoming year, depending on the number of students that they have in any of those options. In order to choose one of the options, their students obviously need to be a registered student in the district, and the information on how to register for traditional school and virtual school is on the district's website. If it's a new student, they have not posted the information yet about registering for the modified day. So again, that's one of those keeping tabs on the website, listening to messages that you might be receiving via the robocall or other forms of communication that the district or your child's particular school may be using will certainly be helpful as well. Okay. So I'm just going to jump to a couple of the questions here, and one of them is there a way to do a combination of virtual and in person? And that is really, so to answer that, that is what the modified day is doing the 2 core classes of language arts and math in a in-person manner, and doing all of the other courses through a virtual learning manner. So that is the modification and the split sort of between the two. But as I said, on the modified day, the student is going to school 5 days a week. Some school districts who have done this the kids are going 2 days a week in batches, but the Lake model has been, right now, is students would be expected to be on campus 5 days a week for that. The first day of school is August 10th. If I misspoke and said the 17th, I apologize for that, but the August 10th is the first day of school as it stands right now. And yes, the modified day is that combination of virtual and in-person learning. Can I put the Lake Schools website in the chat? I can. As soon as I'm not talking, and maybe Jessica, I can ask you to put that in there.
I just put it in there for you. No big
I can barely
You're
walk
handling
and
enough
chew
on that
gum,
side.
let alone type and search and still keep my attention here.
And Jessica and Deb, I think one of the things we can do too, Joy's on, but we can also take that link and send it out to the late foster parents, so they'll have
Right.
it.
Right.
So Ms. Joy, it's in the chat, but I'll also send it to you. It's lake.k12.fl.us. It takes you right to their website.
I'm on the phone, Leah. I tried to give you something fun to do and you didn't want to do it.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. It's in the chat box there. Thank you, Jessica. So a great question about the decision, and whose decision is this? You know, in our most traditional environment, whenever we have children who are in out of home care and a caregiver is seeking to utilize a non-traditional school option, whether that's home education, virtual school, private school, or any of the other assortment of choices that parents have for education in Florida. We always address that with sorry, a little bit of a distraction here. That we always address that by having a staffing and trying to include the caregiver, the parent, the case management staff, guardian ad litem as appropriate, to determine whether it is in a child's best interest to or not. Because again, although any of those are great options for kids, they might not be in a particular child's best interest, especially knowing that we've got, you know, 40% of our kids in care have an IEP, and another, I'm going to say conservatively, probably have another 10% that might be in that evaluation process or need to be, or maybe have a 504 plan. So the special needs of our kids in care are pretty significant. Right now, and we always want that to be a joint discussion, because unless parental rights have been terminated, the parents of our children in care still have rights to be involved in educational decisions, and in fact, in some cases, are the only person that can make some educational decisions, especially as it relates to special education. So, on the flip side, this is not really the normal environment. Because we do have until the 20th, we would really encourage caregivers, if you are, in many cases, some of you do have communication directly with the parents, and if you're comfortable having that dialogue, that is fabulous. If not, I would encourage you to touch base with the child's case manager, because we want to try and have that input of everyone involved. Granted, you know, no one is in the circumstance that you are in. You may have household members whose health and safety may be compromised if you have children going out to the traditional campus, and we are very mindful of that. So it's not like anyone is going to say you want to do that and force your hand and have them in brick and mortar schools instead. But again, we want everyone to be comfortable with the decision. One of the things that has come up with some of the other members is that when the districts have kind of made some what sound like hard and fast rules that whatever you pick, except for Lake right now, is saying that this isn't your final answer. But some of the other districts have indicated that no changing of choices will be entertained during you know, the typical school calendar. They can be entertained at breaks like the semester break, and of course at the end of the year. But I am sure, and Lake County staff were unfortunately not able to join us this evening, but I am sure that they have been an exceptional partner with us, with our children in care. And I know that any district is, if there are really compelling reasons why a family may need to change their choice, I am sure, I can't promise you that, but I am sure that will be considered. You know, if you've got a child that's coming into your home in, say, the end of September, you know, there's going to have to be a decision about what program they're going to do. So I am sure they will be flexible, and when there again are those compelling reasons, consider that. So again, to whatever extent possible, we want to at least have that dialogue with parents and case managers about the options. And with Lake, again, because there is that, you know, sort of wiggle room, if you will, after the 20th, if there's a choice made, and for whatever reason the decision that ultimately wants to be made is different than that choice, we don't have a date yet as to when they're sort of going to make a cutoff for that, but I'm sure, you know, it might be another week. I don't think it'll be very long, because again, with school starting on the 10th, it's only giving the district, you know, 2 or 3 weeks to kind of pull all this together. Question about the kindergartners. Yes, kindergartners entering will be getting Chromebooks as well. Okay, I think, I'm just checking. Jessica, did you get any questions sent to you privately in any way? I know before we were double checking on that. I got all the public ones, but.
Yep, I didn't get anything sent to me privately. So if anybody wants to do a quick question, or they still have lingering things, I know this is a very fluid situation for all of the counties as we move forward. So, I mean, things today could be changing tomorrow, and Kids Central will always try to keep you as updated as we possibly can. So just know that it is a very fluid situation, and things could change dramatically by next week, or they could stay the same. So I know a lot of the Lake families were asking about the Sumter County forum, and we were waiting on Sumter County to put out their options. We are still waiting on them to put out their options. What we are planning on, as soon as they put out their options, we will pick a date and do a Sumter forum. So if anybody has those questions, I know Brandy sent me one, and then I know we got one on the Facebook page today. So
Right. Yeah, and we will do yeah, we will definitely do the Sumter one. They are going to be presenting 3 options. It still has to get approved by their board, but they've publicized it at least. And barring any unforeseen issues, I would suspect that that will be the plan. Districts want to give parents as much opportunity to select an instructional model that works for them and their family. Again, you know, we all know that being in the classroom and having teachers is the ideal scenario for success for children. And given the not only the summer slide that all students kind of experience, but the distance learning in those 3 months prior to summer certainly added to that. So a lot of students are going to need some enhanced services, and in many ways those are going to be best able to, or most effective in a face-to-face format at a school, but understand that that might not be everyone's choice. Okay, so the question is, if we get a placement from another county, would we have the children in one of Lake County's options? So this is going to be a tricky one, because it's really going to depend on where that child has come from another county. So let me just give an example that unless anything changes, Citrus County, for instance, the only option is returning to a brick and mortar school or doing their Citrus virtual school. So it is possible with any county virtual school, and that's why they implemented it. This is the program that many you know, student athletes, those involved in traveling teams and sports, you know, actors and actresses choose the virtual school option because they're connected to their county, but you can do it from anywhere. I mean, you can sit with your Chromebook on the beach or by the pool or in a, you know, classroom that's been set up in your home environment. So for example, that virtual, if that student had been in virtual in Citrus County, then in all likelihood, there is no reason why that child couldn't continue that option if they were then placed in a Lake County home, provided the caregiver can accommodate that. I mean, when you're in virtual school, and if it's a, you know, a young child and you need supervision, that might not be something that you can do. If it's a, something like the modified, obviously there are districts that are doing something along those lines. If it requires face-to-face, then no, that's not going to translate to the next county. It's gonna be a challenge and rather interesting, I think, as we look at these moving forward, because again, the options are very different. We've got some school districts who right now are not reopening their brick and mortar schools in August. So it really amounts to whether that can be accommodated in that environment. The Lake County student that's issued a Chromebook, for instance, they move to Marion County. That Chromebook's not going with them to Marion County, that's staying in Lake County. So whether there's an ability, to a device that they might need could be another issue. Again, the child care kind of issue, whether that adapts to, your home environment or not, whether students are coming or going. These are going to be challenges. Okay.
I think that's all the questions. We do want to make sure that you have Deb's contact information just in case there's questions that pop up as we kind of move through this reopening schools plan for all of our counties. We have an amazing education team that props up a lot of our families, and we want to make sure you guys have access to them. So I'm going to let Deb give you guys that information. Brandy said excellent information. Thank you. So thank you for coming, Brandy. We appreciate you. But Deb, I'm gonna let you give out your information and then we will wrap everything up.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Michelle's so funny. The education team of one. Thank you.
I knew she was thinking that. I knew she was thinking that. I was thinking. I was like, one person.
Listen, you guys are
amazing education team of one.
It is one.
It is an amazing team.
You do such an amazing job, so we do appreciate it.
I'm not gonna lie, she is amazing. But yes, Deb Winters is amazing.
Oh geez. All right, enough. Okay. So my email is really going to be the best way for folks to reach me. So it's Deborah, DEBORAH .Winters, WINTERS at kidscentralinc.org. Again, Deborah, DEBORAH .Winters, WINTERS. Thank you, Jessica. Put it in the chat box. Okay, all right. If there are any questions, and as we get updates, I don't think we'll be having this same type of forum unless there's something major that changes, like schools are not reopening or something to that effect. We will try and make sure that any new information is being communicated. Again, we really appreciate all that you do for our children, and we want to help you in this endeavor. And again, thank you for participating, everyone.
Thanks, Deb. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
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 So cute.